We'll get right into it here. We're going to talk about custom conveyors and material handling systems, how we can connect our workflows and our systems in order to have a fast and error-free build. So we do have the opportunity to have a free business process assessment. So you can scan the QR code here or visit our website. And it's really through these types of assessments that we've come about this process and found a way to really utilize our unique abilities within this space to help manufacturers with their material handling systems and reduce their times from, in some cases, weeks to minutes or hours. So ultimately, I'm Joshua McBride. I'm a Senior CPQ Solution Architect. I've got over 20 years in manufacturing, doing oil and gas compressors, large HVAC systems. I worked in aerospace on a lunar program and helped to ensure that we got the lunar contract with NASA as well. And then I've been with KETIV for 3 or 4 years at this point. And I've got experience with mechanical engineering, research and development, quality assurance, manufacturing engineering, I'm Lean certified, Six Sigma as well. I've also done a lot of data management with Vault and PLM systems and implementing that across 6 facilities across US and Canada. And now I'm doing CPQ, and I'm the architect and manager for our CPQ systems here at KETIV. So what we're going to look at today is we're going to look at what are the main challenges that material manufacturers are dealing with. And we've got a few that we're working to implement solutions for right now. And through that and talks with some other potentials, we've found that there's some unique situations that are faced in that industry, and we've come up with some unique solutions. We're going to get into what those are. Then we'll get into what the workflows typically look like, and then what the real intended or ideal workflows are. And we'll kind of compare those, see what the real gains are that we can get out of things by making some changes. Then we're going to demonstrate the automation of workflows and connectivity that can be achieved. And we'll ultimately get into what is this unique solution that we've come up with as well. So for material handlers, we've talked to and work with a number of conveyor manufacturers. We've also got some people that handle racking systems and things like that, mezzanines and so forth. And some of this could even extend to things like cranes that go into facilities and manufacturing facilities, things like that. But we've found that there's some particular issues, particularly in regards to the design lifecycle, right? And this ends up with the reality is you deal with slow manual design life cycles, then that'll typically pile up. You got deep engineering backlogs, and you're trying to meet customer expectations, but it's time consuming. And as a result, although in a lot of these cases, there's plenty of business, but there's potential for more, and you just can't get it because you're just too loaded, and there's so much time spent on the engineering and trying, can't get new engineers in because they have to have this deep knowledge of the systems and so forth. So what can we do about that to reduce this time and get things moving quickly, get rid of that backlog, get more business, and increase revenue? So, once again, there's workarounds. So rather than following the proper design life cycles, understandably, right, instead of doing that design up front, right, we end up having to create quotes on incomplete design, make assumptions, and and purposely plan to make changes after the fact, right? Changes that would typically be some sort of change order. Instead, we're going to have to manage and deal with the fact that we expect to make changes after the fact because we just don't have the time to design all these things up front, particularly in regards to material handling, because we have to now fit these designs into a existing facility, fit in between certain things, whether that's existing conveyors and connect to existing conveyor systems, or up through mezzanines and back down, and equipment that already exists in that facility and so forth, right? So there's a lot of factors that come into play, and having to deal with all those things after producing a quote and getting the approval, for build and so forth, only to find out later we have to deal with changes because once they finally had the time, or you've even had the time to design this specifically for the situation, you begin to find issues that you have to work around. And that results in losses, financially and time wise and so forth. And so, in order to deal with that, the key is that the CAD layout and design is absolutely necessary, right? Once again, kind of the workaround is to go, let's not do that first, but it's got to ultimately happen before producing something, because if you don't, it's going to end up costing too much on the back end, right? In losses. And so, some of the existing customers that we've worked with already, and once again, we have some that we are working with these solutions now, they've had great success in this area. So we can see, for instance, Nucor Warehouse Systems says, to win, we knew we needed a quicker proposal and design process, and to provide a turnkey solution to customers that show the full value of our racking systems. And then TOMRA Food says, we wanted to be more efficient and focused on the customer experience. And that's really the key here, right? Everything's centered around the customer, right? What does the customer need? What's going to meet their expectations, giving them a smooth, quick experience that results in confidence, and that's going to result in return customers and dedicated customers. And that's one of the biggest things we've seen with some of our past and our current material handling system providers, is they have dedicated customers. And whether that's in order to get as much out of them as possible, providing them the best solution so that they don't have to go try to supplement from others, because once again, these turnaround times are longer than they really need. Or in some cases, they're trying to get some bigger customers. They've got so much potential there, but they just don't have the throughput available for it. So here we can kind of see the typical workflow that results from trying to deal with all these problems and get things moving as quickly as possible. So, you start with a customer identifies a need. They need a rack or conveyor or a mezzanine, and they're going to interact with somebody, whether that's a salesperson or an integration partner or an engineer, right? But they're going to contact somebody and tell them, okay, what their needs are, and they're typically talking about the conveyor specifics, right? The design aspects. Then you've got this point in which, okay, usually in order to try and come up with this price, we're either not doing a cost plus pricing, right, and capturing our true cost, but instead we're doing some sort of length versus width, multiplier type situation, or a situation where we're identifying some previously similar type situation and using that as a best guess estimate, right? And so ultimately we estimate this price. We'll obtain the order and funds, and then at that point, engineering will really start to get involved, right? Get that facility in CAD, whatever system that is, start putting in those things and trying to make them fit, ultimately produce some models and drawings, but then it's expected and inevitable that there's going to be some changes, right? Because we didn't do all that design beforehand. So we find, this beam's in the way, or I didn't have the incline quite right on this, and the hangers aren't going to line up the way I expected. So that's going to take a major shift in things. And this is all time that is cost, right? And then typically that these changes may increase the actual cost, but we've already agreed to this product in this situation. So, that's more losses there that aren't captured. And then ultimately that can backfeed, right? Because we didn't capture the true cost. But then when we go to quote again, we're kind of using this previous one as a measure, whether that's to come up with that link width multiplier, or grabbing that similar system and then trying to do some adjustments and markups. We're compounding those losses and errors in a sense, right? And so, these are where these drawbacks really come in. One of the biggest ones is we're bottlenecked, right? So many of the people come to us because they've tried other systems, they've tried these different situations, and they've come to the realization that this is not working. We've hit a kind of a limit that we can't get beyond. And so it's really inhibiting the growth of the company and the business. Then, the easy answer, it sounds like, is, hey, we'll just get more engineers. We'll get more, whoever. But there's such a high learning curve that really isn't a scalable solution. And not only that, but you bring in somebody new, that's now taking away time from an experienced engineer to teach them. And so you end up with an initial hit instead of gains. And those hits can go for months. I've heard situations where it's like, best case scenario, if I really dedicate myself as an engineer to a new guy, I could probably get them producing on their own in 6 months, right? Well, that also means 6 months of not being able to produce themselves while they're spending all this time teaching, right? Procurement and manufacturing planning, right? That's becomes a big issue, particularly when there's desire to become more efficient, whether that's to have more on stock off the shelf items or on the shelf items, right, that can be pulled from on a regular basis, to make predictions and to go, okay, we've got this big order coming in and we know we're going to need these things. And even to make predictions off of what has not been officially ordered and just looking at, okay, what is going on right now in the before quote and or complete quote and acceptance process, and prepare for that. All these things can result in reducing your cost on parts themselves, as well as labor costs, by having that right there and accessible. We've already addressed the slow and inaccurate quoting process. That's usually what is really causing these shifts. And then ultimately we have unpredictable profit margins. We don't really know what the true cost of our product is, because we're doing these factors and percentages and markup factors in order to come up with a cost, instead of what the true cost is based upon the not just the parts, but the labor time, the design time, and so forth. And then, of course, we don't want to mark things up too much, so we want those things to be as efficient as possible, right? And so, ultimately, in order to combat these issues, we need to reduce our errors and waste, right? And of course, all these things are going to make us a lot more competitive in the market, right? And that's the main thing, right? We want to be more competitive, give the best customer experience possible, move as quickly as possible while providing those customers the confidence that they need to utilize and move forward fast themselves because they're all trying to move fast too, right? And then all these things will feed downstream in order to optimize manufacturing, whether that's through planning, whether that's providing them, all the drawings that they need, all the specifications that they need, and feeding those systems that feed them, right? Making sure that all that information gets into the ERP system and so forth, which then provides for that predictive supply and purchasing processes. Uh, you know, uh, the customer confidence, we've talked about that. And so with these desired outcomes, or to achieve these desired outcomes, we've helped a number of manufacturers with some specific solutions that we can provide. And so here we have a quote from Nucor again, which they said, "We have a unique competitive advantage in our specific marketplace with this solution. All the ways this tools can help us are so exciting." And then with TOMRA Food, they also interestingly say the same thing, right? This is because we're working specifically with them to look at their situations and provide them something specific that is going to help them. And so they said, "We have a unique competitive advantage in our specific marketplace with this solution. We're the only ones in this space doing it this way." And so kind of an example of the desired life cycle that we ultimately are looking for here, right? We have a customer identifies their needs. They just need to know their application information, right? Requiring them to have knowledge of the system, it once again reduces the ability to scale effectively versus when a customer just goes, "This is my situation. This is the material I'm handling, the size, the shape, the weight," and have the system ensure the right horsepower to move across that conveyor, the right gearing, and to use off-the-shelf gearing as often as possible, those types of things. To do all that design beforehand, make it as quick and easy to do that in CAD design within the facility and the situation in which it's going to be used. From that, you get immediate 3D models and drawings. Those can even be used on the quote itself. That you're agreeing to this type of thing. They can make all those changes, get a price for every change they make. They can see what the effects are, which is going to help them to make a better decision and go, "Okay, well, now that I see this price, maybe I don't really need that. All I really need is this, and that's going to work for me." They can make those kinds of decisions. And then at that point, once everything's known and set, once again, this could be within minutes, hours, depending on how complex the design is. Then we place the order, get the funds, and produce. So we're gonna hop into our demo real quick. We're gonna kind of start with what's the typical process to configure a standard order. Then we're going to look at how CAD and BOMs can be generated. Then we're going to look at kind of the custom CAD solution that we can provide and how that can be done on the front end and provided directly to your integration partners and customers, and how that can interact with the complete facility layout. So we're going to start at this parkerlifts.com. It is a fictitious company, but the point here is this is a website that's accessible to you or anybody else today, and you can do the same thing. You can provide those integration partners the ability to log in to your website like I've done here, and they can begin to configure. They have a shopping cart, or we can call that, project or whatever, and we'll look at that here. And in this cart, we can see any previous shopping carts we have. We'll go specifically into one. We could see a product. Of course, you could have multiple products. This could be multiple conveyors, mezzanines, whatever. And we'll look at the configurator. And the real point here is that all this is easily accessible to your customers and your partners to where they can do these things. We've got a visualization here, 3D model that will load and give live results based on any changes. And they can work through this in any order they want. This particular solution provides the ability to not have to work linearly. We'll see as we make changes here, we have some options. We can actually manipulate things directly in the visualization interface. And we can see the immediate results. This is one of the key areas that provides that customer confidence that is needed, right? We can see we also have the ability to optimize. We can optimize based upon the lowest price, highest uptime, power consumption to get the most eco-friendly version. But this is still going to ensure compliance to the customer's needs, what they've selected, any industry or engineering standards, but specializing within those options to meet, once again, their specific needs. They could ultimately request a quote, and all this provides, the confidence that we're ultimately trying to provide that customer. Now, of course, at this point, we don't quite have that in CAD solution. We'll get there, right? But here we can kind of see the key is that connected process. We've got information that has come from the website directly into CPQ. And in that CPQ area, we can manage it, move it through our different workflows. We can see we have the CAD automation will generate that CAD information. It's going to give us back a bill of materials. It's going to give us back files that can be downloaded. So those files can be immediately generated from the website even, provided as a zip, downloaded. The customer could then place those into their facility if they wanted. And of course, these are going to be highly detailed CAD models. And then all the information can be put onto a quote document, and all those drawings ultimately feed through the process to your manufacturing. The CAD system could feed through Vault, feed into the ERP, populate parts and things that you haven't built before, but we can get them into the ERP automatically as a part of this process. And through that, we have a full connected workflow from the web page to Tacton, or in this case Tactons, but from the web page to CPQ to the CRM system to the ERP system, so that we can produce those prices and all the way through to manufacturing, right? A complete connected system. You can see here we can manage that workflow process, ensuring that standards are followed as far as the workflow goes, that things are done in the proper order. And not only does it make it easier to follow that proper order, but it actually reduces the time it takes to do that, right? We get automatic notifications as we go through this process through simple button clicks. The next person in line will get notified that they have things to do here, what their processes is. For instance, procurement, maybe they need to go source something, those types of things. But now we're going to hop into a conveyor-specific solution. We're going to look at one of the methods that we can utilize to place things into our facility, okay? And we can upload a 2D layout that could be a PDF, an image, a CAD file, and we can scale that. And then we'll go into an existing conveyor here and just kind of look at how this works. And so we have our visualization of our conveyor. We can look at it, so forth, make changes if we want to. Those changes would be depicted live, but I'm just going to leave things the way they are. We have calculated horsepowers being selected automatically for us based upon our product. But here we'll go to the layout. We can see we now have this 3D model overlaid on top of our facility. So I can move that around, make sure my spacing is going to work, and everything's going to fit. Ultimately, we could have multiple conveyors here, so you could build out a line of conveyors and make sure we're not going to have any unnecessary intersections and that type of thing. And the advantage here is that this is all available in such a way that this could even be run on a phone. You could use the visualization to even use augmented reality, be in the facility itself, place the 3D model through augmented reality on your phone or tablet, and walk around it and see it in the actual environment and make sure there's proper space there, right? But with all that, we have all these extra abilities, but then KETIV, we've come up with an additional piece that really nobody else that I'm aware of can provide, because we've got the skills for custom automation directly in Inventor, and with our CPQ API experience and integration experience, we can connect these two for a seamless experience that can be utilized as a part of the design and configure quote process. So here in Inventor, I've got a couple machines that are sitting here that I need to connect via a conveyor. And I want to make sure, I've got to make sure the conveyor I get, I want to have full confidence that this is going to fit and work in this specific situation. And so we have this built-in utility directly in the interface of Inventor, and that's going to bring up the CPQ interface in a Inventor-specific window. I'm going to pull this across here so we can see it. And so we can, once again, configure like we saw earlier, make changes. We still have the visualization to give us that quick, obvious feedback, right? But that visualization is not CAD, so I can hit update, and it's going to inject that information into the CAD system and give us full, solid, parametric 3D models. And I can ensure, so we can see here, okay, obviously this does not fit the way I want, so I can make those changes, and I know what those changes are to get it to fit. And now I can see, I know it's going to fit. And if I have a truly custom type situation that I need to make modifications for a situation that's never occurred to connect these two machines that have never been connected before, I have 100% accurate 3D models to do it with. I don't have to produce 3D models so that I can figure out my special bracket. I've got them right here. And if I need to make adjustments for that special bracket, I can make that before we ever get to the past the quoting and the funds, and then find out, oh, this whole conveyor's got to change for me to accommodate these brackets and so forth. Whether that's, an internal engineer doing it, if the customer is doing it, they say, I need a bracket for this, they can clearly see that, and then they can make a request to you and your engineers to come up with that bracket system. So that is the major game changer that we as KETIV provides, the ability to have a design process directly in CAD to place these things in your facility, to move them around, make those adjustments, identify all the needs, and meet those needs in a much quicker, more efficient process, and allowing your sales guys to be a salesman, not an engineer, allows your engineers to not just produce these monotonous drawings because they're all automated, but to handle those custom situations. So the key in all this that we've shown here with this demo is, for KETIV, we were able to come up with this solution, and it is a unique solution within the market. That ability to do that CAD as a part, the CAD within a facility, and get those live results and design as a part of the configure price quote process, to have all these systems connected to feed directly into the ERP system, the CRM system, and move all the way from first customer interaction on a web page all the way to providing the manufacturer their drawings and procurement, the information that they need, and have a complete automated connected system, is something that you can get with us instead of having to go to one vendor and get a piece, then another vendor and get a piece, and another vendor, and then try to find another vendor to connect these. And they don't really understand either part of the system or what your total overall goal is, what's going to be the best implementation and situation to meet your needs. With KETIV, we can handle it all. And this has become a typical thing that we do, right? We'll look at your processes, find out what's going to be the best situation, set up the systems to meet those goals and situations, and implement it. And once again, we have our continued examples here, and we have more coming along the way as we get closer to implementing these solutions for our current customers. But we have TOMRA. Ultimately, they saw an increase in their enterprise level contracts won. And so if you remember back, I was talking about this situation of trying to get some of these larger customers. They may have interest, but just don't have the capacity in some cases. Well, as a result of these solutions, they're now getting those jobs they've been trying to get for a long time now. They have a complete 3D tool, so that the speed alone over 2D was 10 times faster. But most important is the customer experience. We have won a lot of large projects because of this tool. Nucor also increased their contract win rate with increased quoting speed. They literally went from multiple days to hours, right? And once again, I have current implementations with customers in which, in order to get it down to days, they're having to shift these workflows to the back end. And sometimes it still can take weeks versus hours. And so with their designers, they can turn around quotes more quickly, while the automation expedites the steps to put the system together. The simplicity and efficiency widens the net on who can participate in our design process, right? And so that's that scalability we've talked about, and ultimately the ability to provide this as, if you wanted to, anybody could go to the website, configure something, and both you and that customer can have confidence that that's going to meet their needs. You can produce it. It applies to all your rules. They don't have to know those rules. They just have to know what their situation is and what their needs are. And so the outcomes here, with all the effects that we have between sales, engineering, and manufacturing, is it ultimately leads to profitability. With sales, the design and quote process is optimized for the application, right? We can even provide those optimization aspects of, best performing, best price, quickest ship times. All these processes become scalable. The salespeople can work on growing and reaching out more instead of having to do that constant back and forth with the customer. Then they have more stable production, and the product that is purchased becomes more repeatable. The engineering, we know there's full compliance with standards. Some of those standards may be not just design standards for your product, but that could be ASME standards, regional standards, any other government standards across the world, right? Ensuring that if it's built here versus some other country, that those standards are going to be applied. And engineering's knowledge is captured and stored. That's a big deal. People get close to retirement, or you never know if they're looking elsewhere, get a better offer or whatever. We lose that knowledge. Well, now we're capturing it, and we're capturing in a system that utilizes it and actually gives feedback directly to the customer based upon that. Of course, manufacturing, this stabilizes manufacturing, so things like Lean Six Sigma, Kaizen, statistical process control, quality assurance, those types of things can now be implemented and be far more effective versus the extreme back and forth that tend to occur with unstandardized processes, right? Stock levels are easier to handle and predict. Once again, a situation I saw with a manufacturer that were coming to the end of finishing their solution and getting it in play is something as simple as the gears used with the motors and they want to be able to carry stock, but they didn't have a good way of ensuring that they utilize that stock first. Well, now the system's handling it. It's going to use that in stock first. If it, as long as it complies to the efficiency requirements and speed requirements with the motor. And that's just one of many aspects that we're doing that with. And, that all leads once again to profitability. Fewer changes after the quotes are accepted, the customer's happier and confident, the impacts to your overall costs are reduced because the whole system is more efficient, your total volume increases, and now you have accurate data for analysis to make further increases, whether that's just through the standard process or looking at what products are being ordered more often, and how you can improve your product itself. And so ultimately, KETIV, we've got over 40 years in the manufacturing space. That's really where we like to focus, is manufacturing. And we are ultimately a top Autodesk reseller, and we are the sole North American partner for Tacton. Tacton is rated as the #1 CPQ system by Deloitte. They're a leader in the Gartner Magic Quadrant in the last for the last 3 years. We go all the way into ANSYS simulation. We provide custom automation solutions and integration. We have our own branded integration solution called KETIV Data Bridge, so that all these things together, we can provide that end-to-end from first customer interaction on the website to all the way to manufacturing, ensuring that all that information that they need to build the product quickly and efficiently is provided. So once again, we have the opportunity to do a free business process assessment. Of course, if we need to dig further and get really deep, there's opportunity for that as well. So, scan the QR code or visit the website, set that up, because that is really how we are going to help you the best. We're not just trying to sell you our off-the-shelf products or whatever and try to fit something in because we have it. Instead, we want to look at what are your needs, what is your situation and your difficulties and problems, and then we'll figure out with you what is going to best handle that. And we will produce that for you and be your partner and increase your profitability gains and so forth. So thank you for your time.